Hello everyone and welcome to another Top 5 Records video. Late last night, for me, out of the blue, out of nowhere, came the news that there was a new Beatles single. So what did I do? I went to the record store this morning and I found this, the 12-inch version of Now and Then. The so-called final Beatles song, and I'll get into that later on. But I paid $20 for it, which I think is a lot of money for a single. But how often do you get the chance to buy a new Beatles single? Well, this is most likely the last time. At least that's the way they announced it. I'll do a short unpacking. First of all, here is an inlay with the story of this record, which might be interesting because this record came as one of the demos that John Lennon recorded late in the 70s and which the Beatles started to work on for their Anthology box set. The other two songs that were from that session are Free as a Bird, which I really love, and Real Love, which I think is pretty okay. And it's interesting because that, in a certain sense, is somewhat a Beatles reunion. You have John Lennon there, Yoko Ono gave the tape to the Beatles to work on them, and George Harrison is there, Paul McCartney's there, Ringo Starr worked on it. So is that what makes the Beatles Beatles? And I'm going to try to answer that question later on in the review of this single. Now, one song was left off the table, and it's Now and Then, because the quality of the recording was supposedly a letdown, though they did work on there. So this single does feature George Harrison. That is really interesting. Now, with the AI technique that Peter Jackson used for the Let It Be documentary, or the Get Back documentary series, they denoised the original recording. At least the AI made it usable for this single. So you have here a John Lennon written song finished by the Beatles. And the stories here, as a matter of fact, Sean Ono Lennon said, Now and Then is certainly a proper Beatles song because, you know, it's the last song that my dad and Paul and George and Ringo will get to make together. It's like a time capsule, and it feels very meant to me. Those are some nice words. Now, to do a bit more of the unpacking, what I really enjoy about this single, well, you can see what I have here is a colored version, and on the back side you have this old. It's not. I'm not sure. This isn't even the real original Parlophone, is it? I believe those were different colors. But on the B, this is the B side with Love Me Do, and quick review of Love Me Do. I've heard it better. I've heard it better on the original album. I've heard it better on the Hertz pressing. Sounds a little bit digital, and the Apple logo here. Now, the red color is interesting because this single will also be part of the new compilation, which reminds me of the red and blue compilations by the Beatles. So, what we have here is an interesting red vinyl. The song itself, it's a song from the 70s. It's John Lennon sorrow ballad. He made some love songs in which he sings about his own wrongdoings. It's a fragile song. I think it's a fairly okay song, but while listening I constantly think, are these really the Beatles that I'm hearing? This was produced by Paul McCartney and Giles Martin, and what I noticed while listening to this, that reminds me much more of the sound of current Paul McCartney albums than of what the Beatles sounded like. And there are a couple of reasons for that. First of all, the period in John Lennon's life in which he wrote these kind of songs was a different period than the period in which he wrote songs for the Beatles. This song is more private, although he always wrote private songs like Julia. This is more significantly a Lennon song, and not one of his best periods. Not a bad song. I think it's a good song. Let's be clear about that. I think it's a good song. But to me, it doesn't feel like a Beatles song. This is not the kind of song Lennon would write for the Beatles. He would not sing it the way he would sing it if he would have Paul McCartney there. He was a bit more frivolous. He had a bit more joy when he was working together. This sort of sounds like he's singing it to himself. Also on his solo albums, most of his solo albums, there is a difference of tone, which is different from the collaborating tone. Now, I really enjoy, I believe, the slide guitar here by George Harrison. The overall sound really makes me wonder. It's not badly produced, but it sounds like a Paul McCartney production. Because it's a Paul McCartney production. I'm almost thinking that essential to the sound of the Beatles is George Martin. Since they became a studio band, the way they sounded, but also his orchestrations, which are now, I believe there's a violin orchestration, I believe. I'll double check that. Yeah, there is a string arrangement by Paul McCartney. A string arrangement by Paul McCartney is different than a George Martin string arrangement. And really, the Beatles are more than the influence of Paul McCartney. I mean, I love Paul McCartney. He's a brilliant artist. But the Beatles had a unique sound. And the element of collaboration in there and the element of George Martin are essential to what a real Beatles song is to me. Now, I'm happy with this release. I'm happy that I can hear it, and I'm happy that they worked on it. But is it the final Beatles song? Or is it the post-Beatles release? And I think it's the latter. So what do you think? Do you agree? Do you disagree? Leave a comment below and I'll see you in my next video. Bye!